My name is Emily. I work as a nursing assistant at a general hospital in a Midwestern town. The pay isn't great, but every time I see a patient smile, I feel glad I chose this job. My husband David works as a foreman at a construction company, and the three of us, including our 5-year-old son Jake, live in a small apartment. We're not wealthy, but we were happy. At least, we were until that day. David is a serious and kind man. He leaves for the job site early in the morning and works until late in the evening. On his days off, he takes Jake to the park, plays catch with him, and reads him picture books. Every time I see my husband like that, I feel truly grateful I married him. But there was one thing that bothered me. It was David's family. His mother Patricia visits our home 2 or 3 times a week. At first, she said it was to see her grandson, but gradually her purpose changed. She couldn't make rent, needed money for car repairs, couldn't pay medical bills. She always had some reason to ask David for money. His sister Rachel was the same. She couldn't hold down a job and always relied on David. She wanted new clothes, needed money for dates, couldn't pay rent. Both of them took money from my husband as if it were their right. I'd said to David several times, "Isn't it okay to say no?" But he'd always give me a troubled smile and just answer, "Their family." Our own life wasn't easy either. So why did my husband prioritize his family? But I couldn't press him further. It felt like I was blaming him, like I was being cold-hearted. Jake is a sweet child, but when his grandmother or aunt come over, he hides in the corner of the room. He must sense something. They show almost no interest in Jake, always just talking to David about money. Still, my husband couldn't refuse his mother and sister. Then one day, David suddenly collapsed at work. When he was rushed to the hospital, I felt so frightened my heart nearly stopped. The doctor's diagnosis was overwork and stress. He said hospitalization was necessary. I decided to take time off work and focus on caring for my husband. I left Jake with our kind elderly neighbors and went to the hospital every day. Patricia and Rachel rushed to the hospital too. But there was something off about their attitude. Rather than worrying about my husband's condition, they kept asking when he'd be discharged, when he could return to work. One day, I overheard them talking in the hospital room from the hallway. "It's a problem that he can't work yet. We have our own lives too." Those words reached my ears. My chest tightened. When those two came, David was clearly tense. I could see his face pale and his body stiffen. But still, he'd say, "Their family," and couldn't refuse them. I didn't realize then that this was the entrance to a terrible truth. Several days had passed since David's hospitalization began. Every morning I'd drop Jake off with the neighbors and head to the hospital, staying by my husband's side until evening. The doctor said he needed several weeks of rest, but David's recovery was slower than expected. Though his body should have been gradually improving, a shadow remained over his expression. Patricia and Rachel visited the hospital room like it was their daily routine. Every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. At first, I thought his mother and sister were coming because they were worried. But I soon realized that wasn't it. They weren't coming to visit, they were coming to make demands. One afternoon, Patricia came into the hospital room carrying a large shopping bag. Rachel was with her. The two pulled chairs close to the bed and leaned toward David. "David, I need to talk to you about something," Patricia said in a sweet voice. "My knee's been bothering me. When I went to the doctor, he said I need a new treatment." I was sitting in a chair by the window a little ways away, but I could hear the entire conversation. When David answered, "That's tough," Patricia continued as if she'd been waiting for it. "But you see, it's a treatment that insurance won't cover. They said it would cost $100,000. $100,000. I gasped involuntarily. We didn't have that kind of money. Even with insurance, David's hospitalization costs would be considerable. And yet, another $100,000. Mom, we don't have that kind of money. When I tried to interrupt, Patricia glanced at me and turned back to David. You'll figure something out, won't you, son? I'm really in pain, I can't even walk. You're the only one I can rely on. There was an undeniable pressure in Patricia's voice. David nodded slowly, his face pale. Okay. I'll figure something out. The moment I heard those words, something inside me crumbled. The next day, Rachel came alone. She came into the hospital room crying and grabbed David's hand. Help me. My car broke down. They said it would cost $20,000 to fix. And I'm 3 months behind on rent, the landlord's about to evict me. I stood up involuntarily. Rachel, isn't that a bit much? How much is the car repair and rent altogether? She glared at me. $50,000. What about it? David isn't the kind of person who abandons his family. David nodded again, weakly. It's okay. I'll figure something out. I was confused. How did my husband plan to come up with that kind of money? We didn't have much in savings. We still had a mortgage. We needed to save for Jake's education. So why couldn't David refuse their demands? A few days later, I happened to overhear Patricia and Rachel talking outside the hospital room. When I went into the hallway to buy coffee from the vending machine, I heard their laughter from around the corner. Look at this new bag. It was really expensive, but I couldn't resist, Rachel was saying happily. That's nice. I bought a new coat too. Found it on sale at the department store. Patricia's voice was cheerful too. I stopped in my tracks. A new bag? A new coat? Didn't she need money for knee treatment? Couldn't she pay her rent? I turned the corner and stood before them. Patricia, didn't you need money for treatment? My voice was shaking. Patricia looked surprised for a moment, but quickly returned to her usual smile. Well, that's fine. Nothing wrong with treating yourself a little. I was speechless. The two showed no sign of remorse and just walked into the hospital room. I stood there, feeling my heart pounding violently. They were lying. The treatment costs, the rent, the car repairs, it was all lies. After that, David's condition got even worse. Day by day his expression grew darker, and he barely touched his food. A nurse said to me with concern, Mrs. Miller, your husband's appetite is down. His body should be recovering, but it seems like there's some kind of psychological stress. The doctor was puzzled too. The test results aren't bad. Physically, he's recovering well. But sometimes his heart rate is abnormally high, like he's constantly afraid of something. I asked my husband many times. Are you hiding something? Won't you talk to me? But David would just shake his head. It's nothing. I'm fine. One night, after taking Jake home, I went back to the hospital. I wanted to bring David a change of clothes. As I approached the hospital room, I heard low sobs coming from inside. When I opened the door a crack, David was sitting on the bed, covering his face with both hands, crying. I stood there holding my breath. It was the first time I'd seen my husband cry since we got married. His shoulders were trembling slightly. He looked like someone cornered by something terrible. I couldn't enter the room and just leaned against the door in the hallway. Something was happening. My husband was suffering from something. Patricia and Rachel's lies, my husband's strange behavior, and the endless demands for money. I felt like it was all connected. On Thursday afternoon, Jake's preschool let out early, so I took my son to the hospital. Jake clutched a picture of his daddy that he'd drawn at preschool in his small hand. "I'm gonna show Daddy," he said happily, and seeing my son's face, I felt a little warmth in my heart. David might cheer up a bit if he saw Jake's face. As I walked down the hospital hallway, I approached David's room. Normally, I'd knock on the door and just go in, but that day was different. The moment I put my hand on the doorknob, David's voice came from inside. "Don't come in." His voice was more urgent than I'd ever heard. I stopped in surprise. Jake looked up at me anxiously too. "Wait. Emily, don't come in." David's voice continued. Confused, I opened the door just a crack. Then David, who was by the window, looked at me with a pale face. "Go out on the balcony. Right now." He was whispering desperately. I couldn't understand the situation at all. But seeing my husband's expression, I intuited that something terrible was about to happen. "Jake, this way." I took my son's hand and went out onto the balcony through the hospital room window. David followed us, dragging his four-stand. The balcony was narrow, filled with the three of us. David closed the curtain with trembling hands. "Be quiet. Don't make a sound." His voice was shaking with fear. Jake grabbed my clothes, frightened. I held my son while peeking through a gap in the curtain into the room. The hospital room door opened. Two men in black suits came in. One was tall, the other had a stocky build. Neither were doctors or nurses. Their presence was clearly different from ordinary visitors. I held my breath. "This David Miller's room?" the tall one said in a low voice. The two looked around the room and, confirming the bed was empty, clicked their tongues. "He's not here." "Well, whatever. We'll leave a message." The man with the stocky build opened David's nightstand drawer. Rummaging through the contents, he said, "Miller, you listening? Time's up. Pay back the full $500,000 today. If you can't, we'll collect another way." $500,000. My heart nearly stopped. I put too much strength into the arms holding Jake, and my son groaned softly. I hurriedly covered his mouth with my hand. David also put his hand on my shoulder, desperately pleading with his eyes to be quiet. The tall man opened David's bag and dumped the contents on the floor. "The insurance payout was $3 million, right? That's plenty. It's easy to make it look like an accident. It's a hospital, so we could make it medical malpractice too." Hearing those words, my entire body froze. The two walked around the hospital room laughing. "Maybe we'll get the family to cooperate too. The wife and kid, they're cute. Especially the kid, children have accidents easily." The stocky man picked up the picture Jake had drawn at preschool. The picture of Daddy. The man crumpled it up and threw it on the floor. My body trembled with anger and fear. I had to protect Jake. I had to protect my husband. But how? I felt crushed by helplessness. David squeezed my hand tightly. His hand was cold and wet with sweat. "Miller, we heard from your mother and sister too. Said they'd split the insurance money when it comes in. A family affair with the debt, that's funny." The tall man said mockingly. Hearing those words, I understood everything. Patricia and Rachel. They weren't just using David. They were trying to kill him. The two men stayed in the hospital room for a while before finally leaving. "We'll come again tomorrow. Don't think you can run, Miller." The sound of the door closing, and footsteps fading down the hallway. Even so, we couldn't move from the balcony for a while. After about 10 minutes, David slowly opened the curtain. It's okay now. As he said that, he collapsed onto the bed. I went back into the room still holding Jake. On the floor were David's scattered belongings and Jake's crumpled picture. David. I called my husband's name in a trembling voice. What's going on? Who were those people? What do you mean $500,000? Tears overflowed. My husband covered his face with both hands and exhaled deeply. I'm sorry, Emily. It's all my fault. David's voice was hoarse. Mom's surgery costs, Rachel's debts, they were all lies. But I didn't realize it. No, I didn't want to realize it. I was convinced that because they're family, I had to help. I sat down on the floor. Jake was on my lap, frightened and making himself small. So why did you go to Loan Sharks? My voice broke with tears. At first it was a regular bank. But I quickly hit the limit. Mom and Rachel kept demanding more and more. I couldn't refuse. Then Rachel introduced me to a good lender. She said the interest was high, but I could borrow right away. David looked up. His eyes were bloodshot red. But it was a trap. By the time I realized, it was too late. The interest snowballed, and I couldn't pay it back. Then they said to pay them back with insurance money. If I died, $3 million would come in. Mom and Rachel knew that too. They knew, and they told me to borrow more money. I couldn't breathe. Patricia and Rachel were trying to kill their own son, their own brother. For money. They're saying now that I'm in the hospital is the perfect opportunity. If they make it look like medical malpractice, no one will suspect anything. Or they'll stage an accident after I'm discharged. Either way, I'm all ready. David's voice broke off. I hugged Jake and held my husband's hand. Let's run away. Right now, somewhere far away. But David shook his head. It's useless. They'll chase us anywhere. Besides, I can't put you and Jake in danger. I wiped my tears and looked straight into my husband's eyes. I can't abandon you. We're family, aren't we? Real family supports each other at times like this. Hearing those words, David cried too. That night, after putting Jake to bed, I couldn't sleep at all. In my head, the loan shark's words repeated over and over. Split the insurance money when it comes in. Patricia and Rachel were waiting for David's death. No, not just waiting. They were actively trying to drive him to death. The next morning, I made up my mind. I couldn't stay silent. Should I go to the police? But without evidence, they might not believe me. I decided to consult a lawyer first. Fortunately, the hospital had a law office that specialized in medical litigation. I told lawyer Jennifer Hart everything. Patricia and Rachel's demands for money that David had borrowed from loan sharks, and about the debt collectors who appeared in the hospital room yesterday. Jennifer listened to my story with a serious expression. Mrs. Miller, the first thing you need to know is that contracts with illegal loan sharks are legally invalid, Jennifer said. And threats and extortion are clearly crimes. But to prove it, we need evidence. Do you have evidence that your mother-in-law and sister-in-law were conspiring? I shook my head. But at that moment, I remembered something. David's cell phone. Since being hospitalized, he'd barely looked at his phone. Maybe there was evidence there. I returned to the hospital, explained the situation to David, and borrowed his phone. At first he was reluctant, but when I said, to protect our family, he handed over the device as if resigned. The password is Jake's birthday. With trembling hands, I opened the phone. When I opened the messaging app, there were mountains of exchanges with Patricia and Rachel. As I scrolled, Message after message came up that made my blood run cold. A message from Rachel: "Can't you borrow more? You can pay it all back when the insurance money comes in." A message from Patricia: "David, if you die, $3 million will come in. That will solve everything." Scrolling further, there was a group chat with just the two of them. David wasn't in it, just Patricia and Rachel's conversation. "We'll split the insurance money. Good thing he was hospitalized quickly. Now we can move forward with the plan. I talked to the loan shark people too. They said they'll make it look like an accident. I feel bad for David, but this is for the family too." I felt nauseous. Were these people really human? They were discussing plans to kill their own son, their own brother, so calmly. I immediately took screenshots and sent them to Jennifer. Jennifer's reply came quickly. "This is decisive evidence. I'll contact the police right away. And for your husband's safety, let's put security at his hospital room." That same day, 2 plainclothes officers were stationed near the hospital room. David was surprised at first, but when I explained the situation, he showed a relieved expression. A few days later, accompanied by Jennifer and police officers, I called Patricia and Rachel to a conference room at the hospital. The two showed up knowing nothing. "Emily, what's this all about?" Patricia said with her usual smile. Rachel tilted her head beside her. "Please sit down," I said coldly. When the two sat, a police officer closed the room's door. At that moment, Patricia's face changed color. "What is this? I know you were trying to kill David." I looked straight at the two of them. "For insurance money, you conspired with loan sharks to drive my husband to his death." Rachel stood up. "What are you talking about? That's not true." But her voice was trembling. Patricia also desperately denied it. "Emily, you're tired. Such delusions." "It's not a delusion." Jennifer placed documents on the desk. "This is a record of your messages. Plans to split the insurance money, conspiracy with loan sharks, it's all recorded." I placed a tablet in front of the two of them. On the screen were Patricia and Rachel's messages. I could see the color drain from their faces. That is, Patricia stumbled over her words. The police officer stood up. "Patricia Miller, Rachel Miller, you're under arrest on suspicion of attempted insurance fraud, conspiracy, and extortion." The sound of handcuffs echoed in the conference room. Rachel screamed. "Wait! We were just trying to help family." Patricia also desperately pleaded. "It's natural for a son to help his family. What's wrong with that?" I approached the two of them. "After trying to kill family, you dare say that?" My voice was quiet but trembling with anger. "You never thought of David as family. He was just a cash cow." The two were led away by the police officers. Only Jennifer and I remained in the conference room. "Mrs. Miller, you did well," Jennifer placed her hand on my shoulder. "But this isn't over. We need to crack down on the loan sharks too." That afternoon, police searched Patricia and Rachel's homes. What they found there was a detailed plan for insurance fraud. How to stage David's death, how to distribute the insurance money, it was all written down. They also found contracts with the loan sharks. During police interrogation, Patricia and Rachel confessed everything. It had been about insurance money from the start. The plan was to make David borrow money, make it impossible to repay, and drive him to death. The knee treatment, the overdue rent, the broken car, all lies. The borrowed money was used for gambling and purchasing luxury goods. The loan sharks were also arrested in an FBI raid. It was revealed they'd been involved in illegal high-interest lending and multiple insurance fraud cases. David's debt was invalidated as an illegal contract. In the hospital room, I held David's hand. It's over. You're safe now. David was crying. I'm sorry, Emily. I was such a fool. Just because they're family, I blindly believed them. You were just too kind, I wiped my tears too. But real family isn't about blood, it's about people who support each other. Patricia and Rachel weren't your family. Jake and I are your real family. David hugged me. Thank you. Without you and Jake, I would've. His voice was full of gratitude and relief. Outside the window, the sunset was going down. The long nightmare was finally ending. 3 months passed. David was safely discharged, and we started our life as a family of 3 again. Financially, things were far from easy. David's hospital bills remained, and it would take time to rebuild our lives. But we had hope. Our bond as a real family had grown stronger than before. David returned to the construction company. At first it seemed physically tough, but day by day his expression brightened. Most importantly, the shadow of fear had disappeared from his eyes. No one threatened him anymore. He was no longer bound by false family obligations. Jake changed too. He smiled more than before, and his preschool teacher said, "He's been so much brighter lately." One day, my son said to me, "Mommy, Daddy's smiling." Daddy always looked sad before, but now he's different. Hearing those words, I almost cried. Children perceive far more than adults think. On the weekend, the 3 of us sat in the hospital cafeteria. After David's regular checkup, it had become our habit to have coffee here. Jake was absorbed in a coloring book, drinking hot chocolate. "Emily," David said quietly. "I was wrong all along, wasn't I? I assumed family meant blood relations. That because they're my mother and sister, I had to help them no matter what. I held my husband's hand. You were just kind. But real family is different. It's not blood, it's the bond of protecting and supporting each other." Jake looked up from his coloring. "Mommy and Daddy and me are family, right?" At our son's pure words, we couldn't help but laugh. "That's right, Jake. We're the real family." David gently stroked his son's head. Patricia and Rachel are still serving time in prison. No one visits Patricia. The people she called family all disappeared the moment she ran out of money. Rachel was the same. No one would reach out to help her with life after release. What they'd built were relationships connected only by money. The loan sharks were completely destroyed in the FBI raid, organization and all. Many victims were rescued and freed from illegal debts. David was one of them. Those terrifying days would never return. Autumn sunlight streamed through the cafeteria window. David looked at me and smiled. "Thank you, Emily. If you hadn't been there, I wouldn't be here now. We're family, aren't we?" I smiled back. Family stays together no matter what. Jake held up his coloring. "Look. A picture of our family." There were 3 people holding hands and smiling. The sun shone brightly, and there was a rainbow. The future my son drew was full of hope. We overcame the past. Freed from false family obligations, we became family in the true sense. There would still be difficulties ahead. But we have each other. We have a real family that can support and protect one another. Outside the window, the autumn wind rustled the trees. Our new life was beginning now. Walking toward a future filled with hope, with our real family. As a family bound by love and connection.